Okay, and we're online. Hello, my name is Derek. I'm the support team lead at CloudAccess.net. I am here with Samuel Marshall, the owner and developer of JCH Optimize, a website optimization extension available for Joomla and WordPress. And Samuel was gracious enough to get with us here and show us the features of his extension, maybe some useful user cases, and anything else that might help the user successfully use his extension on their website. Hello, Samuel.
Hi, good morning. I'm happy to be here. Happy for the opportunity to share with you my extension that I developed, JCH Optimize, that we use to optimize websites. Right now we have active development on platforms for Joomla and WordPress. So today I plan on just briefly going through the plugin on both platforms, just to familiarize yourself with it, to see what it offers and to see how you can use it to benefit yourself, to benefit your site in terms of optimizing. If you can see my screen, here, this one is on Joomla. And just a quick, on the next tab, this is on WordPress. So it's similar on both platforms. So when you go into the administrator section of the plugin, you'll see a number of tabs. Okay, I had this open for a while. You'll see a number of tabs. On Joomla, you'll see 2 tabs, and there is a toolbar at the top with an options button to the right of that toolbar. Right? On WordPress, you'll see 4 tabs. The main tab is the dashboard, right? And what the dashboard does is to give you an easy access, it's an interface to give you easy access to all the features of the plugin. Here, you really toggle them on or off. And these features, though, do have other settings, other configurations to more fine-tune these features, and you'll find them on the configuration page in Joomla. This is where you click the options button, and this takes you over to the configuration page. Here you have tabs also, general CSS, and so forth. We'll go through that in a little while. All right, cancel, and it takes you back to the dashboard. Similar on WordPress, the dashboard, and it looks similar. The dashboard is a set of buttons, as I said, that gives you access to quickly toggle on or off some of these features, and also to perform some utility functions, some features, such as the clean cache, generate new cache key, so forth and so forth. And on WordPress, there's another tab for the configurations, which looks similarly to the one in Joomla. Similar features, and they are arranged similar to the two, but this one has vertical tabs to take you through all the different configurations. So these configurations are just more fine-tuned settings for all the features that are displayed on the dashboard. So on the dashboard is sectioned or separated into 4 sections. The first one, combine files, automatic settings. And this is really just one feature though. This is, I refer to as the core feature of the plugin to optimize CSS and JavaScript files. So what this does, it combines the files together. It minifies them, which means to take out all the unnecessary white spaces, making the files smaller and easier and quicker to download. These are 6, there are 6 automatic settings, right? Now there are a number of settings that are related to combining files. And so what we have done here to make it a little easier for the users is to compile all of these settings into what we refer to as 6 automatic settings, and they range from minimum to optimum. So it's minimum, intermediate, average, deluxe, premium, optimum. And when you hover over the title of each of these settings, it will show you the granular settings that they are concerned with. So right here, you see the minimum setting. All this does is enable combine CSS and enable combine JavaScript. And when you go to intermediate, you will see the settings that it also does. Now, the idea is once you move from minimum to optimum, then you're increasing the optimization level of the plugin, right? You are enabling more of these features. In the optimum, you see that all the features here are turned on. If I can get this, they're all turned on. So optimization level is increased here, and you should have better performance. But of course, when you increase the optimization level, then you also increase the risk of things going wrong. So the idea here is to keep going and checking your page once you do that at each point to see if everything is still working properly. Right here is just a dev, a local dev of my site, right? That this is actually configuring right now. Most times though, optimum works. I've found on most sites. We have worked a lot. We have done a lot of work to try to make this as robust as possible. So when you use it, it doesn't break your site so easily, right? But if, for instance, if the optimum, you find that there's a problem with the optimum, you can just lower the optimization level a bit to premium perhaps and check to see whether or not that works. I recommend that you, when you're optimizing your site, you don't just go on and turn on all of these features at the same time. But I recommend that you start with the combined files settings. And once you have gotten that working properly, then you can move on to the other settings, right? Sometimes in order to get the combined files working properly, you may need to exclude certain files, CSS or JavaScript files. And this is where you would go into the configuration page and you go on the CSS tab, and you will see that there are options here to exclude files. And I've tried to enable here a drop-down list of files that you find on your page to make it easier for the user to just select which files they'll need to exclude. Identifying the files that you need to exclude, I won't be going much into that in this section, but it's not very difficult to do once you know how. But once you have got that properly sorted out and working, then and you're satisfied with the settings, then you can move on to the other features. Here are some basic features. These are some features that helps to optimize the sites. You have add image attributes, and this helps to prevent cumulative layout shift. What this does is to add height or width attributes to image elements if they are missing. That's a recommendation from PageSpeed. So the plugin will scan the page and try to find all the image elements that have height or width attributes that are missing. And then it will add those and add the appropriate values for those. It will look at the image, measure the size of the image, and add those to the image elements. And this will give the browser early warning in terms of how to render the page to accommodate for the size of the image. Sprite generator, what this does, it combines select background images into a sprite historically to help to reduce the number of HTTP requests that the browser has to make for the server in order to download. So once you enable this one, this will try to identify all the background images that can be included into a sprite. This one, the HTTP push, this preloads critical assets using the HTTP2 protocol to improve largest content, the CP. Now, what this does though is it creates a link. It creates a link header to send to the server to alert the server that, hey, these files needs to be preloaded early, and then the server will do that, right? So this assess on a page by page basis which one of these assets needs to be preloaded. Sometimes these assets are the combined files itself, right? So this is a way to do this automatically for you on this side. Lazy load images, as the name suggests, this differs the loading of images until they are scrolled. If you have images that are below the fold, what this does is to prevent these images from loading until you scroll the page down to where these images are, and then they will use JavaScript to load. So this helps also to speed up the page. Optimize CSS delivery. This helps to prevent render blocking. All right, and this is a very critical feature. What this does is it will assess the page, look at all your CSS files, and try to determine which one of these CSS declarations are required to render that section of the page that is above the fold. And when it does that, then it will put all of these into a style element in the head section. So here you see where the critical CSS is being placed inside of a style element. This is what the plugin had determined that is needed. And so that when the page is loaded, this CSS, just a section of the whole CSS that is in the CSS files, gets loaded early. And so the top section of your page, just that section above the fold, that gets rendered as soon as the page is loaded. Now, the rest of the files, the rest of the CSS files are loaded in an asynchronous manner so as not to block the rendering of the page. Without this feature, when the browser is rendering the HTML and it comes to the link for a CSS file, it would stop rendering at that point. It will download all of that CSS, it will execute it. And the point is that you wouldn't necessarily need all of that CSS at that point to render the section of the page above the fold. So this then prevents that from happening by just identifying the critical CSS that you need, puts it in the style element there, and then the rest of the CSS file that is not needed right now gets loaded asynchronously. The optimize.
I'm sorry to interject,
Yes.
because some of our viewers may not know. If you could please shortly explain what it means that the rest of the CSS is loaded asynchronously.
So it is loaded in a way that doesn't block the render of the page, right? In other words, when the CSS, all right, let me show you what it looks like when it is loading, if I can find it here in the HTML. Let me turn off this one so it goes further. So what you see here is that a preload has been placed here, and there's an onload attribute, right? So in a sense, then this is sort of deferred. It will only load after the page has been rendered. So it prevents it from blocking the page.
Ah, okay.
So in a sense, it's like it's deferring that. Similar to how the defer attribute works on the script files, on the JavaScript files. So this does a similar thing.
Okay. Thank you for
Right?
explaining.
But the idea is that it prevents this file from blocking the render of the page. So when the browser is rendering the HTML and gets to this file, it won't stop here. It will just continue and render the rest of the page. And then this will be loaded later.
Okay, very cool.
Right. So optimize Google fonts. This is a similar feature to the optimized CSS delivery, but this is really for just Google fonts. I'm not using Google fonts on this file, on this site, so I'm not able to demonstrate it. But the idea is that this allows Google font to be downloaded quickly and to be rendered quickly, right? So that the pages or the text that uses Google fonts can also be rendered quickly. The CDN feature, this works with pull zone CDNs. What this means is that you have some CDNs that are called pull zone CDNs, right? They give you a CDN domain, and then the plugin here will go through the HTML. It will swap your domain in the URL of the images or the static resources, and it will put in the CDN domain instead of your domain. And so it will now request for these resources from the CDN server. If the resources are already saved on the CDN server, then they will be loaded from there, right? And this helps to speed up the loading of the site because the CDN servers might be closer to the user's site or server than your actual server, right? And if the resources are not on the CDN server, then it will pull the resources from your site, save them on this CDN server, and catch them there. So the next time the user requests them, then it will be loaded directly from the CDN servers. And this helps to speed up your site tremendously. But of course, this requires another service. This requires you to get a CDN server, a CDN service from a CDN provider. All right. This is just an easy way to implement that feature on your site if you already have a CDN provider. The Smart Combine. This works with the combined files. Generally, what this does is to combine all the files into one files. Historically, to reduce HTTP requests. So all the CSS files will be combined into one large CSS file, and all the JavaScript files will be combined into one large JavaScript files. With HTTP2, that isn't so necessary, but there's still some benefit from combining. So what this does, it sort of provide a happy medium between the two extremes of having individual files and just one large files. This actually would combine them in smaller number of files, right? And what it tries to do, it tries to identify which files to put together so that when you move to another page, you have consistency in terms of the names of the files on the page. So you benefit also from browser caching, and you also benefit from better HTTP2 delivery by not requesting and downloading large files, but rather some smaller files. Page cache. This really isn't a feature of the plugin on Joomla, because Joomla comes with a native page cache plugin that works pretty well with JCH optimized. So this is really to integrate with that plugin, so you can enable or disable that plugin from JCH optimized without moving from JCH optimized, since caching of the page is also a very good optimization technique, right? So this sort of tries to augment that feature from the page cache plugin here. Over here, going in an anti-clockwise manner, we have some advanced settings, and I separated these from the others because these tend to be more likely to cause issues and may require additional configuration to work properly, though they can be beneficial, right? So I just put them here as a heads up that if you're having issues, it's probably best to disable these first. But remove unused CSS. Oftentimes when you do page speed, you might see that alert that you are loading CSS that is not being used. What this plugin does, when you enable this, it sort of works along with the optimized CSS delivery, right? So it's pretty much like a setting inside optimized CSS delivery, because it requires the optimized CSS delivery feature to be on for this to work. So in this case, when you enable remove unused CSS, the same thing happens with optimized CSS delivery, where it finds a critical CSS and puts it in a style element at the head. But this time, rather than preloading or loading the CSS asynchronously, it actually doesn't load it at all until the user interacts with the page. Doesn't load the CSS until the user moves his mouse or scrolls or clicks on something, then it loads. So what this does is to ensure that no CSS that is not being used at all is loaded initially, right? Only the CSS that is required to render and display the section of the page that is above the fold. And then once you touch the page, then the other CSS will load. So it doesn't matter, you'll see everything as you should. And if you're scrolling down, by the time you scroll down, then the other CSS would have been loaded and you'll see the rest of the page in a nutshell. The next feature here is reduce DOM. And sometimes on page speed, you will get this alert that you have an excessive amount of DOM elements on your page. So what this tries to do is a similar thing like the remove unused CSS, but it will identify some section of the page. Like for instance, like elements that are these HTML5 elements, section, header, footer, aside. Now, if any of these elements that are below the fold, it sort of comments them out. And so that part doesn't get rendered until the user interacts with the page, right? Sometimes it works, and when it does, it really significantly addresses that issue and speeds up the page. But the difficulty with this is that sometimes some of these pages, sometimes some of these sections of the page, when you load them like that, it stops working. So with this one now, you can actually select which ones of the elements that you want loaded like that, perhaps you will be able to avoid a particular section that doesn't work so well and still have the benefit, right? So this is still a work in progress, but a number of users so far have reported performance increasing with it. So we're still working on this to get this working a little bit better. On the top here now is utility tasks. These are really some tasks that are performed when you click optimize HT access. What this does is to insert into your HT access file some codes which will instruct the browser to cache them, all right, or to store them inside the browser so that the next time you visit the site, you don't have to download. And so you have that feel like the page is being loaded much quicker. I can just go to the docs here and I'll show you what these codes leverage browser caching. And so this is what the codes that has been placed into the file will look like. And this is instructing that, hey, if it's an image video, then you cache it in the browser for at least a month. If it's CSS or JavaScript, then a year, and so forth. Order plugin in Joomla, the order at which the plugins load and fire, it's important. You want this plugin to be loaded as low as possible in the order in which they are fired. The only plugins that should be loaded after are like caching plugins and a few other select plugins that we have found needs to be loaded after this plugin is loaded. The reason for this is that sometimes you have plugins that are actually modifying the page and you really want the HTML to be done, modified before you start optimizing it. And so with this, what this does, when you click on it, it automatically orders the plugin for you. Generate new cache key. If you're making changes to the CSS or JavaScript files, then sometimes those files might have been cached into the browser. So by generating a new cache key, what this does, it will change the names of the files the next time you load the plugin. And so you can see your changes immediately after that. And of course, this cleans the cache because the plugin is doing a lot of optimizations, doing a lot of work. You don't want to do this on every load. So there are several layers of caching going on inside the plugin. These files, when they're optimized, they'll be cached so that the next time you load your page, it's not optimizing these files again. It will just be pulling these straight from cache. And so maybe on the first load per se, it might load a little, might take a little longer to load. But on the second time that you load, all of these optimizations would have been done, would have been cached and saved, and you can bypass all of that production by just serving the file some cache. And so it becomes quicker until the cache has expired or until you clean the cache. So sometimes you might need to clean the cache. Maybe, of course, if you're making changes, you want to clean the cache, or if you're making changes to your configuration, right? The next major feature or tab is optimize image. Optimize images. And of course, this is also an alert that you will tend to see a lot, especially recently on page speed. The idea of optimizing images is to make them smaller, compressing them a bit, getting rid of some of the data that is in it that isn't quite necessary, but without reducing the quality of the image. And so this does that. There are two ways to do it. I have here automatic, optimize image, and manual, although this might be a bit of a misnomer. It doesn't really do it automatic, maybe semi-automatic. Maybe a better name would be to do by page. Because when you click this button, it will scan all the pages of your site for the images to optimize, starting from your home page, but really just the main menu. And then all the pages of the main menu, it will scan those, look for all the images, and then it sends it to our server. We have a server that does this. So it's using an API, and then it will optimize them and send the optimized image back to your site. The plugin will replace the original image with the optimized image, and it will save the original image in a backup folder, right? So you can look at the images if you are okay with how they look after they're optimized, then you can delete the backup images or not. Or if you're not, then you can click this button to restore the original images. While it does that, it also will determine if there are better optimization if you change the format of the image to WebP. You know, that's a newer, they call it next generation formats that is being requested now. WebP images are better compressed and smaller generally than PNG, JPEGs, or GIF images. So it will do that too. And as long as the plugin is running, then it saves all of these WebP images at one location. And as long as the plugin is running, then it will change in the HTML, the URL, to swap the URL from the original image to the location of the WebP image. So you get the WebP images loaded instead. And there's also an option to optimize based on folder, right? For instance, you probably want to optimize just a single image and you know where the location is. So you can click through on the folder here. We have a folder tree. On this side is folders. And so you click on images, then on this side, it will show you the subfolders and the images in that folder. So you can choose which images you want to optimize. If you want to resize the image also, then you put the new width, the new height, and you click. And this will optimize the image, resize it, and also generate the WebP images and save those. For here, when you use the automatic optimize image option, it will try to automatically resize the image to the size that it is shown on screen. That's a tremendous savings there. A lot of times what you find happening is that users are using images that are larger than is necessary. And so you waste time downloading that large image, and then the browser will resize it to fit inside your screen there. So you could have saved a lot there by just resizing the image to the size that is required and just downloading that side. Of course, here shows you more fine-tuning in terms of the different settings for CSS files. These are the automatic settings. These are the settings that are being configured from the automatic settings on the control panel. If you want to exclude CSS files, maybe there's a file there that isn't being used at all. You get better optimization by just removing it altogether. Optimize Google fonts, just a simple one, yes. Optimize CSS delivery. These are more settings there. I have similar thing with the JavaScript. a lot of exclude options and remove JavaScript files. Under the media tab is where you have the add image attributes feature, the sprite generator with some other fine-tuning settings, lazy load images. You can enable it here, but also some other settings. If you want to lazy load iframes, yes or no, you can add that. You want to lazy load background images or audio videos. Maybe there are some images that you want to exclude. Like for instance, images that are above the fold, you really want to exclude those images. The plugin actually tries to exclude them automatically because when you lazy load images that are above the fold, you're actually reducing performance. Actually, you want those images to be loaded as early as possible, right? So the plugin tries to do that in case it doesn't get all those images right. You really want to come here and exclude them. Maybe there are some images that don't work so well. For instance, sliders. Sometimes they tend to conflict if you try to laser load images in sliders because those images are already being manipulated using JavaScript. So you exclude them to make them work. You can exclude by folders, or you can put a class on the image and exclude them like that. HTTP push, same thing here. You can include or exclude files. If you are preloading files that are not being used right away, that actually reduces your performance too. And you tend to see an alert in the console. So you can exclude those files. CDN, this is where you configure where the domain, you get the domain name here from your CDN provider. I have had stack path. I'm not using it right now, but you can decide which extensions you want to be loaded over that CDN, or if you have more than one domain, you can determine which extension should be loaded from which domains. And if there is an extension that I didn't list here, you can add it yourself under the custom extensions. Optimize image. These are some settings to further fine tune that. This is whether or not you want to use the next gen images, the WebP. If you want WebP loaded and generated, then you enable this. Support old browser. There are some browsers that don't support WebP, and so what this does is wraps the whole image into a picture element, and this will load the WebP image on those browsers that support it and use the original image for the browsers that don't. Optimization level, this is a new feature still, not released, yeah, but you can determine lossy or non-lossy, or whether or not you want to save metadata. Sometimes these images have data such as copyrights. You can decide whether or not you want to keep them. Stripping them, of course, will result in better optimization, but some users have requested that we include this because they want to keep the copyright information. And I mentioned auto resize. Miscellaneous, reduce page cache, no, reduce DOM size. Get rid of this phone, and page cache integration. So on the Joomla platform, we have a module that I refer to as mode switcher. And you'll find it at the bottom of the page. It says JCS optimize mode production. What this does is just give you an easy way of disabling the plugin on the page in case you're doing some development work. So right now it's in production. So when you look on the HTML, you'll see that it is compressed. You'll see combined file here. And this appears on all of the pages in the administration section. You can just easily click that. and right away, it's no longer compressed. This is what it looks like before, right? Also, when that happens, it cleans the cache automatically and also generate a new cache key. So the next time you enable it, then the names or combined files will change automatically. So if you made any changes, you don't have to worry about browser caching. This isn't yet available on the WordPress, but I'm gonna be adding that. On the WordPress, what you have here is a menu item that is shown on every page on the administrator section. And this gives you easy access to the settings, which we're on right now, or you can clean the cache from anywhere on the site. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. While I was preparing for it here, this is a dev site that I use to test WordPress. And I just did a quick comparison. This is what it was before I enabled the plugin. 64 on mobile, desktop 86. Not bad. But after I enabled and just enable a few of the features, it's now 86 on mobile, and on desktop it's 95. All right, and that's coming from 64 and 86. And did the same with a Joomla site that I have here set up. Before it was on mobile 37, desktop 60. After on mobile it's 49 and 85. This is another one on Joomla. Before it was 52 and 53, mobile and desktop. After it was 73 and 81. So typically about a 20 points jump. And this is with just enabling some basic features. With a furthermore fine tuning, of course, we probably could have gotten it a little bit higher. But that's it in a nutshell, just to show you how to use the plugin on both Joomla and on WordPress, and how it can help to improve the performance of your site.
That is very cool. Thank you very much, Samuel. I'm sure that the viewers will have found this very informative. I, for myself, can say that I have actually learned quite a few new things, even though I've been using JCH Optimized for some websites that I've built. But you know, especially how some of those elements relate to each other. This is something that kind of eluded me in the past, but for me personally, these snippets were like the most useful thing in it, and I'm sure our users will find the whole presentation useful. So thank you very much for your time, Samuel.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you to anybody who has just finished watching this video, and we'll be back with more webinars in the future. Have a nice day.
Okay, you too. Thanks.